Welcome to the Darkstream, Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Thanks for tuning in. We are preparing for a election night hang tomorrow. So if you're on DLive, pay attention because it's going to be UATV exclusive. We'll be doing the hang there. We're going to be doing a push over the next 2 months or so, focusing on improving our UATV game. Not just the devs. You're going to see obviously some changes to the site very soon. Quite possibly some significant performance improvements starting tomorrow for viewers and subscribers in the USA. So we'll talk about that. We'll probably talk about it tomorrow night if everything's working well, because we'll have plenty of time to talk as we're waiting for the results to come in. But one thing that I'm going to do to encourage people to be comfortable subscribing to UATV in general and the Darkstream in particular is I'm going to make a commitment to streaming 4 times a week. And I'm also going to, that includes Arcaven Nights, by the way, on Thursdays. And I'm going to start trying to become a little bit more organized about what topics we address on what days. So, maybe we'll do one day that's more focused on science and technology, one day that's more focused on current events and conspiracy. We'll see. Obviously, there's not going to be a regular day scheduled devoted to soccer. There was not a lot of interest in the soccer stream net, so which is fine, which is fair. I don't expect everybody to share all of my interests, but one thing that I know very well from my blogging experience is that if you don't do it regularly, if you don't do it every day, which is best, you at least have to do it on a regular schedule, and that's just something that I haven't been able to do for the last year or so, however long it's been. But now that we've got things more under control, now that the devs are getting more comfortable with where things are technically, then I think it's good for some of us on the creator side to do a better job at addressing do a better job. I mean, Owen has been pulling the load. We're still adding a lot of stuff all the time. Chuck Dixon's got 216 videos up there. There's a ton of content. I probably will not be, in fact, I almost certainly will not be doing a weekly theology stream, since we already have a full-time theology channel. Yeah, I was pretty sure you were kidding, but best to address. It's hard to stream as consistently and for as long a time as Owen. Well, yeah, I mean, I can't. I've got way too much stuff going on. I'm still finishing, putting the final touches on the Sigma game book, which, by the way, I think we've learned that just doing a 30-day crowdfund is probably better. Owen has been on an absolute tear in the last month or so. He's doing a great job of building things back up again. We really took a big hit in the spring, and we're still only 45% of our peak. So we'd like to at least get back to having 10,000 subscribers where we were before, and then build from there. So book club is a good idea. That is a definite possibility. I could absolutely talk once a week about books if that's of interest to people. Books I'm reading, not books that we're publishing and selling, obviously. I don't want to turn this into a commercial hour. What we could do perhaps is have it sponsored by a particular book. Maybe that would work. In fact, we've got I've just got my shipping notification for volume 4 of Castelia History, which is the studies in the Napoleonic Wars, which I'm very much looking forward to. And it's not a big surprise. I'll go ahead and just unofficially announce right now. We'll do the official announcement after the election, but the November-December book is A Sea of Skulls Volume 2. So if you are subscribed to get Volume 1, you're almost certainly going to want that, I would expect. And it's going to be a good one. It's going to be even better than the Throne of Bones leather. So what was the other thing I wanted to do? Science was one thing. Science and technology was one thing. Current events we have to do. Comics, then a book club. Maybe book club every other week and mix in with something else. We'll figure it out. Of course, what I'd most like to talk about tonight, more than anything, I'm not going to talk very long about it, but I would, a Murakami book review. Well, Murakami has a new book coming out in November that I have on my Christmas list. And so I'm not going to be doing that one right away, but certainly I wouldn't mind spending an hour talking about Killing Commandante or Killing Commendatore, or addressing, I read a book recently. It's it's the second volume of literary criticism of Murakami's books, and he makes a pretty good case. I'm not sure I buy it entirely, but I actually went back and reread 3 or 4 Murakami books in the last 3 weeks or so after finishing that book. And he does make a very good case about there being a strong amount of post-Freudian, Jungian shadow self elements to Murakami's writing. How conscious that is on his part, it's hard to say. But there's definitely an element of Murakami there that most people, including myself, were not aware of how deep a theme it is through all of his books, and how that theme first appears and how it transforms over the course of his career. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. I mean, that's the kind of thing that we can talk about. I don't mind at all going more deeply into the more esoteric elements of great writers. It wasn't something that had really occurred to me was of that much interest to people subscribing on UATV. I could be wrong. I mean, that's why I ask. I don't assume anything. I'm still astonished that so many people are so into the collecting the leather books as they've proven to be. I love that you guys keep pushing us to do better, to keep elevating, and it should be interesting. TVC said your close reading of Kant was good. Kurdish Bear wants Julius Evola. I'm not going to, just to be clear, I'm not at all interested in diving into the obsessive political theories of the right. I don't regard them as being particularly, whether you're talking about Evola or whether you're talking about Curtis Yarvin or who's that, Thomas Carlyle. I don't take any of them very seriously, and I don't really understand why so many people do. Now, one thing that I am thinking about doing is Chris Langan did a 2-hour interview with somebody who apparently didn't really understand very much of Langan's theory. I thought it might be interesting to maybe break it into 3 parts and watch the video here with you guys, and then do comment on it, maybe try to explain a few things. Langan's one of the few people where I'm in the potential position of explainer and popularizer. And so, assuming that I can sufficiently grasp the concepts that he's talking about, it might be worth trying. I mean, obviously, if we do the first one and it's just completely beyond me, then we won't. But I have read his primary paper on it. I think that I can at least reasonably make some sense of people. Ironically, this is what my very first actual political piece that was ever published was published literally the day it was published the day after I met Space Bunny. And the opinion page editor of the Pioneer Press, St. Paul Pioneer Press, had asked me to read the Unabomber's letter and translate it for everyone, because basically none of the journalists could understand what he was talking about. So they said, hey, we got this young guy who's writing about technology and games, so give him a crack at it. And I think you can find it on the blog. If you look on the blog, I think I may have published it. Just do a search for Unabomber and we can probably find it. But what I really, of course, want to talk about and get off my chest is there is no question that the NFL referees have a thumb on the scale. I mean, it was unbelievable last night. Not just, first of all, twice, there were fumble returns for touchdowns. You know, a fumble 6, if you will, that were not called back for penalties. Now, in principle, I'm kind of okay with that. It's really, really annoying when you see this great defensive play and it's an exciting play and it has major ramifications and all that sort of thing, and it gets called back because, oh, there was, defensive holding on the other side of the line that had nothing to do with anything that happens. I mean, and so I suspect that there is a NFL policy of, you know what, unless it's a really big deal, let's not try to interfere with, let's not try to annul any returns for touchdowns. Whether it's, you see a lot less blocking in the back calls on punts and kickoffs than you used to, which I think is great. I think it's good. But it is really irksome when, for example, in the case of the Vikings, the guy clocked Bradford in the head with his hand. There's no question. It was totally obvious. I believe they even threw a flag on it and then picked it up after the NFL called and said, yeah, that's not going to be a penalty. Let's see. Razorfist made this point recently. After record low ratings, final next year was record high. Well, I think that it's less about what they're doing with the referees. I mean, they are doing some funky things with the referees, but I think part of the reason for the popularity is that, they got rid of almost all the SJW stuff. They're not doing a month of Pinktober anymore. Colin Kaepernick is gone. Nobody's kneeling with the national anthem. Now, maybe they finessed some of that by just not starting the television with the national anthem and creating the opportunity for people to make a scene. And certainly it's interesting how the players have made it clear, Nick Bosa wearing a MAGA cap and so forth. Well, speaking of Saquon Barkley, yes, obviously that spin and reverse hurdle was exceptional. I mean, just the athleticism was amazing. The presence of mind and the physical awareness to do that was just unbelievable. But that's not why, people didn't turn the TV off because they didn't like the product that the NFL was providing, that they didn't like the sports or anything. They turned it off because they didn't want to be politically lectured. And to the NFL's credit, probably the more conservative owners came out and said, look at the NBA. The NBA is dying because it embraced politics. We're not going to do that. And yes, it's irritating that they still allow the players to put end racism on the back of their helmets, but you know what? About 95% of them don't. And what I find interesting too is, have you ever noticed anything about Derrick Henry, Tuialalova, or however you pronounce it, the Miami Dolphins quarterback? Some of the more influential players on the league are making very, very public professions of their Christianity. I believe it was Derrick Henry was the first one that I noticed doing it regularly. He started doing it apparently back in college, but they wear their eye black in the form of a cross, sometimes two, one on each cheek, and so it's interesting to see how the Christians in the league subverted the league's attempt to embrace convergence. Now the problem with the thumb on the scale is the same thing. Saquon Barkley, after he had a great game, phenomenal catch, unbelievable reverse hurdle, great running, but he did have a fumble. And I thought that I initially thought that they gave the fumble because he did get his foot scooped a little bit by a defensive player, but then he stumbled right into a offensive lineman, and so I thought, well, maybe they decided that the contact was too soon. He was actually not knocked down by the contact with his own player. Except then I saw it from a different angle this morning, and I was like, yeah, he was definitely down by contact, no question. But here's the thing: in both cases, the defensive return for the touchdown was by the team that was, in the case of New York and Jacksonville, well behind, and in the case of the Colts versus Vikings, the Colts basically had no offense. Their offense wasn't able to do anything against the Vikings defense. In fact, that was the only touchdown that the Colts scored. And so it was the thumb on the scale. Generally speaking, when you see a thumb on the scale very early, then it tends to be the team that the league wants to win. So you're always going to see, you always saw it with the Patriots. You always see it with the Chiefs in the playoffs. You can usually tell by the end of the second drive of each team who the thumb on the scale is going to be in the favor of. But when you're dealing with games that the league does not expect to be competitive, and remember, this is a league that worships parity above all, then I think that you can safely conclude that you're seeing the thumb on the scale. And I was actually, to be honest, encouraged, even though I was annoyed, I was actually encouraged when I saw that, because I thought, oh, okay, well, the Vikings are in very good shape to win then. If they have to put the thumb on the scale, there's no way that they want the Colts to win in this situation. The Colts aren't going anywhere. So they're doing it in order to try to keep the game keep the game close. And sure enough, then Darnold quit screwing around, started throwing it to Justin Jefferson instead of to the other team, and boom, 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 game's over. So anyhow, I've got that off my chest. I just wanted to point out that. I have to admit, for the first time in 20 some years, I have college football available to me that isn't just the bowl games. And I have to admit, I've been enjoying being able to hunt down everything from Bucknell University games against Cornell to the new Big Ten. It's fun to see the Gophers actually winning a game or two against teams like USC and UCLA. I mean, how do you not watch Minnesota USC when you grew up in Minnesota, your mother went to USC, and it's only the fifth time they'd played, like since 1950 or something. It was really fun. Anyhow, but that's neither here nor there. So again, tomorrow night we'll be doing an election hang. We'll start at 7 p.m. Eastern. Probably go for maybe 2.5 hours. We'll see. We'll just see how it goes. I have no idea whether it's going to, we have no idea the level of shenanigans. We have no idea if a single state will even be declared. It's going to be pretty obvious if there is a Trump slide, or if there is, a third Trump slide. One that can't be stolen because, the East Coast states, if Kamala loses even one of those East Coast states that, are normally solidly Democratic, and it's obviously going to be over no matter how they cheat. So maybe we'll be able to see how it ends, maybe not, but or it might be like 2020 when I erroneously concluded that it was over for Trump after we confirmed that he'd won Florida. So, I have no expectations. I mean, I assume if I had to make a call, I would assume that Trump is going to be permitted to win. Whether that's because they've negotiated the agreement, whether it's because his faction has wiped out enough of the globalist faction, or whether he's struck a deal with AI PAC. I have no idea. But certainly the way that the media rhetoric is going, and the way that a lot of people that would prefer Harris to be the president are cozying up to Trump, you have to assume that the script calls for a Trump return to power. It's always looked that way, to be honest. So, I mean, if you think about it, from the moment that he didn't cross the Rubicon in 2016, the only way that the story makes any sense is the triumphant return. Unless he was going to disappear entirely, there had to be a triumphant return. And, whether they were legitimate or not, the mere fact that there were these assassination attempts tends to suggest that there wasn't confidence in the repetition of the Steele game. If Rogue Roman says, if Trump wins, that indicates the Q people have accomplished something behind the scenes. It suggests that it might be legitimate, but it doesn't prove anything. I mean, if he comes out and makes that ladies and gentlemen statement that Q predicted, then I think we can take it more seriously. But again, the main point of Q is maintaining hope. And that is a good thing. I don't have any patience for the black pillars, the people that just want to give up and declare all is lost and that sort of thing. That's not virtuous. It's the opposite of virtuous. Hope, love, joy, faith, these things are virtues. Remember that. So let's go to, this is going to be, I'm not even going to bother trying for a segue, but I'm going to share with you something significant that, potentially significant. I had an epiphany about this today, and it had to do with evolution and this particular thing that I was using this to make fun of AI, right? So I asked the Bing AI the question, how can evolution by natural selection be considered credible, given the amount of time it takes for mutation to fixate throughout an entire species? And the AI response was interesting because what it focused on is the actual question. What question did I actually ask there? I asked, how can it be considered credible? Not, is it credible? But the way that it can be considered credible is the time it takes for mutation to fixate in a population can indeed be lengthy. But evolution by natural selection is supported by ample scientific evidence across various fields like genetics, paleontology, and comparative anatomy. Here's why it's credible: fossil record, genetic evidence, observable evolution, and biogeography. Now, none of this means a damn thing. None of this means a single damn thing. Because if it's mathematically impossible, then it's mathematically impossible. It can't happen. If it can't happen, it didn't happen. End of story. Natural selection works over long periods, allowing beneficial mutations to accumulate and spread. Yes, we know that's what it is. The point is, every single beneficial mutation has to propagate and fixate across the entire freaking population for evolution by natural selection to exist, right? So I got more specific to avoid that. Well, why does it sound credible? So I said, what is the average number of generations required for a genetic mutation to fixate throughout the entire population of a species? The time it takes for a genetic mutation to fixate, become the norm across a whole population, varies widely. Okay. And depends upon factors such as mutation rates, population size, and natural selection. Okay. But here's a rough idea. In a large population without selective pressure, the fixation of a neutral mutation could take roughly 4 times any generations, where any is the effective population size. With strong positive selection, the fixation can be much quicker, sometimes within a few dozen generations. Well, here's the problem. A few dozen generations isn't fast enough. We know it has to be within 20. It has to average 20 generations. It has to be 20 generations every single time, or even faster to make up for the ones that aren't that quick. So now what's interesting is this is what got me thinking here, because all of this is just set up. So even with a very small population of 1,000 individuals, which is small enough to render the species officially endangered, it will take at least 4,000 generations to fixate a single gene without natural selection. Here's the problem. The bigger the population, the more generations required. The fastest fixation ever observed took place in the laboratory. Strong positive selection, small laboratory population. It still took 1,600 generations. Nowhere near 20. The so-called Genghis Khan gene propagated at a rate that would require at least 8,000 generations to fixate. They looked at and there's an interesting paper that I found. They actually found 11 other Y chromosomal genetic patterns, which would tend to point to a single male individual. One of which goes back to as far as 2100 BC. So that's 4,000 years. And so the amount of genetic change that has to exist in that ancient prehistoric sample should be significant, and it has to be much more significant than it actually is, I would bet. I don't actually know. But here's where it gets interesting. So I thought, well, at what point is a species endangered? Right? Because they love to use these small numbers. Well, with a small enough thing, so they're always like trying to push small, small, small. in order to make it possible for the gene to fixate, right? Well, here are the actual numbers, and this is based on the bald eagle. So with the bald eagle, where did I put that? Okay. In 1963, that's when the bald eagle was declared endangered. And there were 417 breeding pairs, and there were an estimated 993 eagles. So endangered, but that's not the high end of endangered. They didn't move it until it wasn't until 1995 when there were 4,712 pairs and a total of 11,219 eagles that they said, okay, this is not endangered, this is now threatened. Remember, this is endangered and threatened with extinction. And so when you're looking at this stuff, these are the small populations that are required. The species, in order to survive, have to have more than that many individuals. And so then in 2007, it was taken off the threatened list. There were 9,789 pairs and 23,307 healthy eagles. So the bigger the population, the longer it takes for a beneficial mutation that appears in one eagle to gradually propagate through the entire species. Because remember, there's a starting point and there's an ending point with evolution. You have the last common chimp-human ancestor, right? We're talking evolution talk here. You have to believe that it existed, but if you want to criticize evolution and prove that it's impossible, you have to understand how it works, and you have to understand the terminology. So you've got this last common ancestor, that's the start point. You've got modern humans, and you've got modern chimpanzees. So there has to be enough time for every single gene that is different from the starting point and the two ending points. And we can calculate the difference, even if we don't have that first one. We can calculate what the difference has to be by observing the difference between the human genetics and the chimp genetics. Every single gene that the chimp has that the human doesn't, and vice versa, has to be derived in the time given from the starting point. And it's absolutely impossible. It's the equivalent. This is why I like analogies, because, and why it's important to work out proper mathematical analogies, because it's easier for people to understand. I mean, those of you who are more mathematically inclined, who have maybe thought about genetic science a little bit more, you guys understand already how totally impossible what I'm describing is, right? So let me put it in terms that anybody can understand. If somebody comes up to you and says, I drove from New York City to Los Angeles in 12 minutes, would you believe them? Would you believe that it was even remotely possible to drive from New York City to Los Angeles in 12 minutes? Of course not. You can't even get out of New York State. In fact, you probably can't even get out of New York City in 12 minutes in a car. That is how obviously and totally and completely impossible evolution by natural selection is. That's all you have to do to completely disprove it. Now, that doesn't tell us how these things happen. Was it alien surgeons? Was it God? Was it previous neo-human races doing genetic engineering? All of those possibilities are infinitely more likely than evolution by natural selection. If you believe in evolution by natural selection, you are functionally retarded. You're not thinking about it at all. You haven't even begun to understand the basic issues involved. And it's really fascinating to see how even the AI systems can't even begin to consider the math. Think about that. The population, remember, it was 4 times the population size. In order to have a population that is not actively threatened with extinction, you need to have 25,000 individuals. 25,000 times 4 means that for genetic drift to fix one mutation without the advantage of any natural selection pressure, any sexual selection pressure, it would require 100,000 years per gene. 100,000 years per gene. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Not 1,000, not 100,000 years. 100,000, wait, was it years or no, generations. 100,000 generations. Do you see the gap between the 100,000 generations required to fixate a neutral gene and the 20 generations that natural selection has? We would have to believe that natural selection power is on the order of 5,000 times faster. There is no natural selection power that great. None. Absolutely none. And so it doesn't matter what we look at. It doesn't matter whether you want to look at, the last common primate, when you want to go back to the first mammal, any of those things. You cannot do it. It is absolutely impossible. There isn't a single person, not a single biologist, not a single geneticist who has ever even begun trying to respond to this. And the thing is, the mathematicians pretty much figured this out back in the 1960s. They pointed out, they didn't have as sophisticated tools and details at their disposal as I do. So, you can't blame them for not definitely destroying the argument the way that I have. But they pointed it out. They said this is going to be an issue. This will absolutely be an issue. And the biologists at the time actually admitted, yeah, that is an issue, but we feel pretty good about eventually addressing it, but it hasn't gone their way at all. Not even close. Coffee Grounds Bear says, took me more than one viewing of the JF debate to understand what you were pointing towards, but I couldn't unsee it once I did. Well, that's the thing. And this is one of the reasons why they're so silent about this stuff. Have you ever noticed that nobody even wants to criticize me about it? They don't want to criticize me about it because it's indisputable. There's absolutely no way that they can defend this, explain it away, wave their hands. And what I was excited about, and my epiphany, is that there is now a way, with the genetic science that they're doing, there's now a way to compute the maximum reach of a single individual. And with that piece of information, it'll be possible to cap the absolute maximum rate in generations that can be provided, that can be accessed through fixation, whether it's sexual selection, whether it's natural selection. And obviously, sexual selection is a lot more powerful than natural selection. We know this. You know, if you can control which pairs are breeding, and you can achieve results much faster than just leaving things alone and hoping for a mutation will just happen for no reason, and then it'll just happen to be advantageous to that one specimen, and that it'll be so advantageous that it'll just keep getting picked up. I mean, it's the funniest thing is it's total nonsense once you actually understand the wholeness of it. It's complete and obvious nonsense. I mean, it's not an exaggeration to say that I should win the Nobel Prize in biology for, you know, publicize or for articulating mittens. It's probably one of the more significant, quote unquote, discoveries in biology, you know, in the last 50 years in terms of understanding. Obviously not in terms of, you know, if somebody cures a cancer, or if they successfully demonstrate that ivermectin, you know, cures cancer or something, I mean, by all means, please give the awards there. You know my interest in awards. But if you look at the kind of stuff that they're giving out awards for, and Ron Unz has a really funny piece. I've got to read it in more detail, but he's got a really funny piece just openly mocking the recent economics prize that isn't actually a Nobel Prize. But it is really funny. I mean, you know, you can take this with as much assurance as you need. Evolution by natural selection is absolutely, completely, utterly, and totally dead. You know, what this actually, you know, Darwinism was dead. Mendel killed Darwinism. So what they did is they kind of played a little fast and loose, glued it together, and basically said, okay, well, we're doing all this real science with genes, and then what we'll do is we'll say, and this is consistent with natural selection. You know, or is not inconsistent with it, whatever, you know. But yeah, all of these guys, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, the late Daniel Dennett, none of them could even begin to scratch the paint on the conceptual vehicle. Yeah, not a chance. Yeah, 100K generations equals 2 million years for humans to fix one neutral gene. And that's assuming that there's only 25,000 humans. You know, there's a lot of detail work to further explicate stuff, but the keys are all there. It's the proof is all there. It's already done. There's no, the genie is completely, utterly, and totally out of the bottle. And you don't need to take my word for it. You can do all the math yourself. All you need to know is how many genes have mutated and fixated between one specimen and another. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced now that you can disprove evolution by natural selection with two people, by doing a full genetic scan of two people living today. Because the differences that will be revealed are too great. Kajia is impressed. He said, and you did that kind of in your spare time. Kind of in my spare time? I did it in about half an hour. You know? Yeah, it's kind of funny. Off topic, I received my 4 copies of War and Peace. They are beautiful. Well, Exterminator Bear, thank you very much for your extremely strong support. You guys know UATV, Castalia Library, these are group projects. It's not about me. It's not about Owen. It's about the whole community, and it's about what it allows us to accomplish together. I mean, look at this. Do you understand that you helped destroy the theory of evolution by natural selection? You guys were an integral part of that because I was writing for you guys and you guys were commenting on it, raising questions, answering questions, all this sort of thing. CCP says, I make $15 per hour. I'm going to work a lot of overtime and save up to buy a $6 million house in cash with cash this year. Yeah, that's the absurdity. We should actually work out here's what would be useful. Go to the blog, look up the analogy about the traffic driving. Let's see if we can find it here. We'll go here. Let's see. So if we go evolution minutes, that should give us something. Not even close. Well, if somebody can find it, let me know. Put the link in the chat here. We got another 10 minutes to go, so if we've put it in the chat, what I would love is I would love to see you guys give me 20 different metaphors demonstrating the mathematical impossibility of evolution by natural selection based on the genetic distance. And let's put them out there. Just start the memes, unleash the memes. I mean, not in the next 2 days because obviously things are going to get busy, but there's nothing that can defend it any longer. Paul made me do it. Says so basically a Catholic priest and a Christian nationalist killed the theory of evolution. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to the possibility that I somehow got something wrong somewhere or that I didn't understand something somewhere. It's possible in theory. The probability of that, however, is very, very low. I'm not stupid. I'm relatively careful about expressing a strong opinion on things until I've thought through the matter, looked at it, looked at it this way, looked at it that way, looked at it backwards, looked at it upside down, and so it's not that I am under any illusions whatsoever about my intelligence being infallible or anything like that. Absolutely not. But the degree of the error is so great that it's unmistakable. You can't possibly, it's very difficult to be wrong about this. Rogue Roman says the only possible counter to your argument is evidence that the mutation fixation rate is higher. Well, that's one. That's the one that they run to. But of course, if you notice, just like JF and every other evolutionary true believer who has tried to criticize it, is that they have to go right to generalities. They have to immediately go to argumentum ad imaginarium. They make appeals to their own imagination, which is pretty ironic considering the way that they like to run. They like to complain everybody's a creationist, but they have nothing else. The implication for the counter argument would be that we are spectating constantly, and that thus various populations face our new species. Well, but that still wouldn't work. I mean, to be honest, that's true. That's not a counter argument. That's actually an implication. I am pointing out, in fact, that the distinction between one modern human and another is much greater than anybody imagines. We talked about this. In fact, I remember popping up a screen showing that. And so the whole thing is much more. I would think that scientists would be super excited about this, because it means that it's aliens or God or something interesting. It didn't just happen. They hide behind the obscurities and muddied waters of big numbers and rely on the audience's ignorance to actually run the numbers. Well, correct. And that's why you see so many people that are effective critics of the theory of evolution by natural selection, especially in the modern context, coming from physics, mathematics, economics. What is the one thing that those three professions, training, have in common? The one thing that mathematicians, physicists, and economists all have in common is that they're all accustomed to working with big numbers. The economist is regularly working with bigger numbers and more significant variables than is involved in evolution or paleontology or any of those things. The numbers that they claim are so big are not really very big. They're just flat out not. And the math is not that difficult. It just involves bigger numbers than the average person is accustomed to doing. You're generally not going to do it in your head. You're going to need a calculator. Well, that eliminates 98% of all people thinking about it. So, but yeah, I tend to agree that atheists are going to have to switch to aliens pretty soon, because just the whole random mechanic universe thing is not going to work. Top fan. Wow, I have a top fan. I have data from my family group on family tree DNA, and we have a handful of Y chromosome SNP changes from about 10 to 12 generations ago. Right, and do all of you have them? That's the interesting thing. What change, if you can see a change, what percentage of the current family? Yeah, I'd love to see it. Just what I'd like to know, you can email me, voxday@gmail.com. Email me just the basic summary, and what I'd really like to know is if there is a difference, if there's a genetic difference, what percentage of the modern population shares it? Also, what the population sizes are. So that's where things get interesting. Because again, it's not about the mutation existing or the mutation surviving. It's about the mutation fixating. Would you classify Christo-fascist as more fake or more gay rhetoric? I think it's more fake. I mean, yes, it's also gay, but it's mostly fake because no one has ever considered. I mean, first of all, fascism is not a general thing. That's a That's a post-World War II invention. Fascism means something. To exist as an ideology, an ism has to mean something. The reason conservatism is an attitude and not an ideology is because it doesn't have any core meaning. To be a conservative can mean totally different, totally contrary things in different situations. But fascism is a historical ideology that has specific beliefs and that is not really extant anymore. There might be a few neo-fascists in Italy somewhere, but it's no more meaningful than talking about people in Istanbul and asking them if they're blues or greens. Jim Bob's debate with JF asking, do all your chapters in your book start with imagine if? And they do, of course, because I didn't come up with argumentum ad imaginarium from nowhere. It came from observing how the scientists were presenting their arguments. Yeah, I'll have to read up more on the Y chromosome. I haven't paid any attention to that particularly. So, but anyhow. Oh, and one thing that we'll definitely do on the streams is I will regularly do one stream dedicated to Sigma Game, the social-sexual hierarchy, etc., etc. We can do questions. I'll force myself to sit through the occasional. A girl talked to me once. I think it might mean that I'm a weird combination of Delta Sigma. What am I? And then we'll all make fun of them. So that could be fun. Here's a question I don't know if I can answer. Could you articulate your mission statement in a couple sentences, or your main goal for the years you have left? I would say that my main goal is to establish my children, my children's children, and my children's children's children to be healthy, happy, joyful Christians who are effective servants of their faith and their nation. That would be, more than anything, that would be my objective. I don't, to me, money and fame and those sorts of things are just means to an end. Personally, things that I would like to see, I would like to write a truly great novel. I would like to, for once, develop a truly groundbreaking great game. Not really concerned about the recognition for it so far, more the satisfaction of having done it. I'm very pleased with how A Throne of Bones and A Sea of Skulls have turned out. The idea that I would ever be even compared to Tolkien and Lord of the Rings by people with a straight face, even though the comparison is not to my advantage. Yeah. Okay, there is the one lunatic who very graciously wrote a very detailed review and declared that that Arts of Dark and Light was better than Lord of the Rings. I think he's wrong. But I would really like to write a novel that stands with Murakami and Eiko. That was my original goal back in the day. I did not work on Deus Ex, no. I didn't know a few of the people who did. We're working on something now. You'll hear about it soon. Could be interesting. but I also want, I mean, my goals are beyond my family. I want everyone in this community to be married, to have children, to do well, to be healthy, to be joyful, to serve Jesus Christ to the best of your understanding. I don't care if you're Catholic. I don't care if you're Orthodox. I don't care if you're Methodist or Presbyterian. Or Calvinist. I have my doubts about the correctness of every single one of those doctrinal dogmas. Every single one. And, you know, I personally don't believe God cares very much about the details. To me, the Bible is one long reminder that God makes it as simple for us as we can, and we still can't do it. We still can't manage it. But because he knows what's in our heart, because he sees what's in our heart, it doesn't matter. He knows if you tried to keep the rules that you believed. He knows. He knows if you're trying to fool everybody around you. I said this on Social Galactic to someone today, a Catholic, I believe, and he was saying, "But this, but that." It's all it is, all it always is. Theology is just extrapolation, and all extrapolations can be done different ways. Kurgan versus Vox theology. I don't debate friends. No disrespect to my friends, no disrespect to their intellectual capabilities or their knowledge, but if you want to see what I do to people, go take a look at my debate with Tom Kratman. I tried to avoid it as much as I could. He kept demanding it and demanding it and demanding it, and then was upset about how badly humiliated he felt. I mean, I know exactly what arguments the Kurgan's going to make. I know exactly what arguments pretty much anyone's going to make. Why do you think I'm so open to potential criticism of Mittens? I would be fascinated to see somebody come up with something I can't anticipate. I mean, I don't think most of you, what's the best way to put this? I think there are very, very few people who have any idea how good at debating a subject that I have sufficient knowledge of I am. I'm not bragging. I'm saying go read, every single time I debate anybody, afterwards people are like, well, I mean, yeah, that was really easy, but they weren't that great. Despite the fact that it was always put forward. It was always put forward, oh, you would never be able to debate this guy. I mean, for crying out loud. You can read the book of my debate with the economics professor from James Mason University. He was a free trade advocate, and by the end of our debate, he's a very intellectually honest guy. He came right out and said, "Yeah, you're right." I mean, can you imagine the biologist who was capable of doing that? We might see it yet, but I doubt it. They're much more likely to deny the existence of arithmetic, But the thing is, I don't want to do that to my friends. And I really don't want to debate anybody on a subject that, for whatever reason, is close to their heart. Swedish Trash Panda said, after your Mises debate about free trade, you didn't change my mind. Did, however, change way later. Well, but what didn't, what didn't, what did you not get? What did you not grasp? What did you think was wrong? You know, because nothing's changed. Um, yeah, Floyd Mayweather. I don't fight mediocre fighters. I make them look mediocre. Yeah, I mean, people are saying, "Oh, you have to debate this guy who's Andrew." Or no, first it was like Kevin, somebody, Keith. I can't remember. Some, it was the guy. It was the guy who always says "white." You know. Um, Anyhow, so I debated him. He didn't have a chance. Then everyone said, "Oh, well, you need to debate Andrew Anglin." That was, that was, no, it wasn't Jared Taylor. It was somebody else. But anyhow, the thing is that, you've got to, uh, it's not just about, um, it's not just about, being smart or being well read or something. It's basically about being intellectually ruthless with yourself. Being willing to not only admit that you make mistakes, but look for your mistakes, look for your plot holes, look for the weaknesses in your argument. You know, um, have you thought about developing succession plans? Yeah, of course. Who will take up the SDL mantle in the future? Well, I think there's plenty of people who, I'll have done what I've done, and others will, do better. I'm already totally unnecessary to unauthorized. I'm totally unnecessary to Castalia Library. We've already got people who are doing most of the work for both, which I very much appreciate. My whole goal was to render myself unnecessary. You know, there's so much more up on unauthorized here than has anything to do with me. People are going to take Sigma Game and the SSH to places that I never even imagined. We're still making major observations, and people are helping me. People on the blog and you guys on these discussions are helping me make observations that I never would have made just sitting around in the dark thinking about things on my own. The whole discovery of delta narcissism and the importance of the link between empathy and social status is really kind of remarkable because it's so naturally counterintuitive. Austin is kind. He says, we have some idea of how good I am at debate stuff. That's why we know we're lucky to have your streams. Well, I appreciate that, although, to be honest, I'm embarrassed by my streams in a way that I'm not embarrassed by my blog or my books. Just because, if you're not naturally good at speaking off the cuff, at being entertaining and all that sort of thing, everything just seems to be sort of disjointed and haphazard. I really don't like looking at transcripts of this blog, especially because, the natural engagement with the comments, which is great, just doesn't read well. Silent Draco points to the real reason. No biologist wants to upset the flow of grants by admitting that TENS is dead. But that's what's so stupid about it is, why are they wasting their time on that bullshit? They could be using this brand new horizon, these vast vistas of possibility, to be exploring and looking for more interesting stuff. Rogue Roman actually has a good observation here. The delta makes himself indispensable. The sigma makes himself unnecessary. Well, that's the morally advanced sigma, the kinder, gentler Dark Lord. Because he's gonna leave anyhow. It's just a question: is he gonna leave and leave you all hanging, or is he gonna leave you in good shape to make do without him? I've been following the streams for years in the hope that Vox flexes and finally embraces cam girl life. I don't even know what that is, um, but I'm pretty sure Space Bunny wouldn't approve of it. So, but the thing is, I'm actually extremely grateful because despite all of the discreditings and deplatformings and demonetizations and this, that, and the other thing, and all the obstacles that have been placed in the way, um, you know, I have an opportunity to constantly be trying to stretch my mind. You know, I mean, I think that one of the things that's very healthy for a middle-aged man is to prevent the intellectual ossification that's natural to a routine life by constantly having to deal with different challenges, different pressures, different situations, all those sorts of things. I mean, you know, those shelves behind me, that's a dream. I mean, I know I know some of you guys like your leather books almost as much as I do, but I mean, um, how can you not be appreciative and thankful for whatever makes that possible, you know? But one thing that I would like to do is um, I would like to do more, get back to doing some more of the basics, the things that we're supposed to be doing as Christians. Um, and so that would be desirable, I think. But it's not for public, that's not the kind of stuff that's for public discussion. So, but the important thing is to aim high. Aim high, but accept where you end up. There's nothing wrong with aiming high. If you aim high, you'll end up being more successful than if you didn't do it in the first place. But then you also have to be willing to accept where you end up. You know, I thought I might be able to become a Umberto Eco style public intellectual. That was before I realized that I was going to be completely banned by all media unless they're doing hit pieces. C'est la vie. It's fine. Anyhow, have a good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to UATV, subscribe to the Darkstream, and join us tomorrow for our election night hang. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.